Hello and welcome. My name is Dawn Durham. I am an educational consultant with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. This session you're about to view is referenced as a quick pick. It's meant to be a quick pickup of information about a particular topic you're interested in learning about. Today we're talking about sound walls using the science of reading to help students spell. I'm excited that you've chosen to take some time out of your day to explore a new way of organizing words in your classroom. Before we begin, I just want to make sure we all understand Patton's role. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local educational agencies to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. Here's what we're going to be going over today during this quick pick. We're going to first talk about how learners perceive words. We need to understand that in order to understand how to use a sound wall and why it's important in our classroom. We'll talk about what a word wall is and how it's organized, and I think that conversation will lead us nicely into the limitations of a traditional word wall. I'll introduce you to a sound wall, this valuable tool that you'll find in your classroom both for your teaching and for students' learning. And we'll share some ideas on how to incorporate a sound wall into your classroom. Let's first take a look at our language system. We have to have a solid understanding of how our language works in order to better help students with their spelling and use that valuable tool of a sound wall that I'll introduce you to in a little bit. It's important to understand that our language system is comprised of individual speech sounds. We call an individual speech sound a phoneme. So if you hear me say phoneme or sound, we're using the same term. When I walk up to you in the morning, do I go h-e-l-o? Certainly not, right? I smush all those sounds together. We call that co-articulation when we push all of our sounds together to have oral language. The key here is that when we're talking about writing or spelling and reading, we can't go with co-articulation. We have to understand the individual speech sounds that make up the words we're using. Many people think because we can speak, we can read and write, and that's not really the case. Our brains are hardwired for oral language. They are not hardwired for reading and writing, so therefore we need to provide that instruction. When we think about our individual speech sounds, we talk a lot about place of articulation. Where in the mouth a sound is occurring. Is it occurring towards the front of my mouth, like Is it occurring towards the middle of my mouth, like s? How about the back of my mouth, like k? So we think about the place, where in the mouth the sound is coming from, and we also think about manner of articulation, or how that sound is being formed. What's happening with our tongue, our lips, our teeth? What's the airflow doing with our in our mouth and coming out of our nose to help make that sound? What I have here listed is the categories in which we put our sounds into, and this all has to do with that place of articulation and manner of articulation, where and how the sound is happening. So let's first talk about a stop. A stop is a sound where when you make the sound, there's a big puff of air that comes out. So if you were to put your hand in front of your face, in front of your mouth, and make the sound that the letter P says, P, P. Do you feel that puff of air coming out? That's a stop sound. It's kind of punched right out. We then have nasal sounds. Nasal sounds is where you have the airflow coming through your nose. So go ahead and make the sound for the letter M. If you were to pinch your nose, you can't make that sound anymore. You've cut off the airflow, therefore that sound can't come through the nose anymore. We have fricatives. Fricatives is something where there's some kind of friction getting in the way, whether that be your lips, your tongue, or your teeth. Something is getting in the way of that airflow, and only a small amount of air can come through. So for example, the SH, shh, our teeth is causing some friction, and just a little bit of air is able to sneak through where your teeth come together. We have affricates. Affricates I like to think of like a tug-of-war game. You have two people pulling on this rope as hard as they can. Inevitably, one person's going to let go and the other person's going to fall. I think of that as an affricate. What you have is some kind of friction going on, and then all of a sudden there's a puff of air. So think about the letter J. What sound would the letter J make? J, J. There's some friction going on and then a puff of air comes out. That's what we think about when we think about affricates. Glides are just like what they sound. They kind of glide right into another letter. So think of your sounds or y. They glide right into another sound. Sometimes they're hard to separate because of that glide. And then liquids, well, liquids go all over the place. It's as if I were to put some water on my hand, sprinkle some water, and I throw it up in the air, there'd be water droplets all over. Liquids kind of go all over in our mouth. So make the sound for the letter L. We can kind of feel and think about how that sound is in a couple different places in our mouth. It's important to understand the categories that our sounds are placed in because this is how learners perceive their sounds. They think about the way in which their mouth feels. They think about the airflow in their mouth. They think about the way their face or their mouth looks when they're making their sounds. So we have to have a solid understanding of the language system so we can understand how students are perceiving the sounds that they hear coming out of your mouth and coming out of their own mouth. When we think about consonants in our language, we think about voiced and unvoiced. Go ahead and take your hand and put it right up to your throat, your voice box, and go ahead and make this sound with me. K, k, k. Do you feel any vibrations or shaking in your voice box? Nope. Your voice box is turned off, so it's an unvoiced sound. Keeping your hand there, go ahead and make the sound g, g, g. Do you feel that vibration and shaking? Your voice box is turned on. Now you're making a voiced sound. Learners perceive their sounds, whether it's a voiced or unvoiced. Is their voice box on or off? And it's important to think about that when talking to students about their language. In our consonants, we also have stops and continuants. A stop is a sound that comes right out and it stops, whereas a continuant goes on until you run out of breath. So for example, B is a stop sound, puffs right out, and you can't do anything else with it. Whereas we have a continuant, you can make the sound until your breath runs out. This sound just keeps on going. Voiced and unvoiced has to do with that voice box, turning it on or off, and stops and continuants have to do with if the sound can come out quickly or if it goes and continues on until you run out of breath. Here's what I'd like you to do. Go ahead and get a blank piece of paper out. Run through all the consonants in the alphabet and see if you can list what's a stop sound and what's a continuant sound. So say all the sounds of the consonants out loud. Think about, is it a stop? Does it puff right out? Or is it a continuant where it just keeps on going? Go ahead and jot that down real quick for me. And let me show you what I came up with. Here I have my stops and my continuants. You can see what puffs right out and what continues to go until you run out of breath. Let's see if you can do a little challenge here. Put your hand on your voice box. Say each of these sounds out loud. See if you can determine, is your voice box on or is your voice box off? Voiced or unvoiced? And go ahead and mark that with a U or a V is fine. Remember to say the consonant sounds out loud. That will certainly help you determine if it's voiced or unvoiced. Here's what I came up with. Okay? Again, this may be some new information for you, so don't get discouraged. We're really focusing on that voice box. Kiddos focus on this voice box as well. Again, they perceive their sounds through how it feels and how it looks. So if you think about this, I think of k and g very quickly when I think about voiced and unvoiced. I have students who will write the k sound when they really want a g sound. And it's all because of that voice box or that voicing issue. They're not sure if they should turn it on or off, or if they feel it on or feel it off. So understanding the difference between a voiced and unvoiced sound can certainly help you understand what difficulties or struggles your students are having with some of their sounds when they're writing it down for spelling or for a writing sample or writing journal. Now let's talk about vowels. We talked about consonants, now let's take a look at vowels. All of your vowels are voiced. Your voice box will be turned on for every time you say a or a, I, and so on down the line. Vowels are also categorized as long or short. In linguistic terms, we call that tense or lax. Tense is another word for a long vowel, and it's because our muscles are really tight and tense. So go ahead and feel your face when you say the sound E, A, I. Feel how your muscles are really tight in here? That's because they're very tense. Just another way of thinking of long vowels. Short vowels we refer to as lax. Your muscles are a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more loose. So go ahead and feel your face when you make these sounds. A, You're a little bit looser and more lax with your muscles. Always voiced for your vowels, and they can be long or short, or tense or lax, depending on how your muscles are feeling. So let's take a minute to just review what we talked about with our language system. When we think about our sounds of our language, we have the place or the manner of articulation, where and how these sounds are forming in our mouth. We have consonants and vowels, and with consonants and vowels, we think about voicing or unvoicing, our voice box turned on or off. We think about stops or continuance, whether that sound is pushed right out or it continues to go until we run out of breath. And we think about tense or lax for vowels, or long and short sounds. Now that we have a good solid understanding of our language system, let's go ahead and take a look at a traditional word wall, and I think you'll see some limitations as we continue to talk about what a traditional word wall is and how it's set up in our classrooms. Here's a picture of a word wall. Perhaps it looks like one you have in your classroom or have seen in other classrooms. If you notice, this word wall is set up from alphabetical order. It goes A to Z, and it really focuses on the first letter the word is spelled with. So I want you to think about if you're a first grader in my classroom, and my assignment or my task to you was to write about what you did this past weekend. You got a new bike, you took it out for a ride, and you want to tell me about that, but it turns out when you were on this new bike, you fell and scraped your knee. That's a detail you want to include in your story, but you don't know how to spell the word knee. So you head to the word wall. Now, if you're a first grade student, and you don't know how to spell the word knee, where are you going to look under the word wall? Under what letter? N, right? Because you hear the N sound. If you're using this word wall, are you ever going to find the word knee under the letter N? Nope. Why not? Well, because it's spelled with a K as a silent letter and then the N. But that's not how this word wall is set up. This word wall is set up by the first letter. So if you're a first grader who doesn't know how to spell a word, is the word wall going to help you? Not so much, no. A word wall is set up going A to Z in that alphabetical order, and it really focuses on the first letter that the word is written with or printed with. So it's really talking about the spelling, not the sound. And unfortunately, and I know because it happened in my classroom too, oftentimes word walls become wallpaper. They look pretty, we're supposed to have them up, it looks good, but it's not really a tool I use for teaching, and it's certainly not a tool that my students use independently unless I'm sitting there holding their hands, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having a word wall. A word wall really, a traditional word wall, really pushes that whole print to speech idea, but that's not what our language is set up. Our language is not set up print to speech. We are a speech to print language, and a traditional word wall does not support this. So let's take a look at this word wall again. Again, you're in my first grade classroom. I want to set it up to be successful for my students. Where am I going to put the word they? Probably under the letter T, right? Because it starts with a T. But what's the sound for letter T? T. So now I have T, A. Oh gosh, I don't want the kiddos doing that. What about a word that starts with the SH digraph? Shh. Am I going to put it under the S? Oof. What about if I really want to push my kiddos and we just talked about a great vocabulary word, genre? Where are you going to put genre on this board? I kind of got you thinking a little bit, didn't I? The traditional word wall has some limitations because, again, it pushes that print to speech, and that's not the way we perceive our language. Let me introduce you to an alternative to how we organize words in our classroom. Let's talk about a sound wall. Pretend you're that first grade student in my classroom again, and this time you still want to write that story about you're getting your new bike and going for a ride and falling down and scraping your knee. You don't know how to spell the word knee, so you go to the sound wall. Are you going to be able to find the word knee here? Sure. Because here we have listed the sound N and the various ways to spell that N sound. Now I have an attempt at being successful in that first grade classroom. A sound wall is not organized by letters, rather it's organized by speech sounds. We're not looking at how a word is spelled, we're looking at how a word sounds, and we're attaching that to the print. It really comes at things from a learner's point of view versus the teacher's perspective. And ultimately, this tool is meant for the learner, so we really need to be thinking about their point of view and their perspective when putting a tool in place in our classroom. It really attaches that phoneme to grapheme. So much like I had said, a student could go and find the sound n, and then there were various ways in which to list the ways we spell that sound. That's attaching the phoneme, the sound, to the grapheme, the letter or letter pattern that can spell that sound. Let me show you another example of that here. Here's just a kind of a close-up of that word wall. If I was a student who wanted to come write a word that had the s sound, I come here to find all of the different ways in which I can spell that s sound. I'm attaching the phoneme s to all of these different graphemes, or the different letter or letter combinations to spell that sound. That's a strong connection that we want students to know and to build on for their stronger learning and reading and writing skills. A sound wall really focuses on that speech to print, which is how we have our language. We go from oral language to print. Remember we talked about that traditional word wall kind of is a little bit backwards. It goes print to speech. A sound wall allows us to focus speech to print, which is how we perceive and how our language works. Now that you understand what a sound wall is, let's talk about how we put this valuable tool into your classroom to make it effective for your teaching and for your students' learning. One of the things I want you to think about is consonants and vowels really should be separate. They're two different entities in our language system. Consonants are really meant to be organized by that manner of articulation. So you might have all the stops together, you might have all the glides together, all the affricates together, and so on. But you want to group them in like ways because that's how students are going to start to think about how they're saying the sounds and the words. They're going to be thinking about how does that look and how does that feel. I need to go to that area on the sound wall to find out how I spell that sound. Vowels are a little bit different. They're organized in the position of your mouth. Let me show you that. When we say the different vowel sounds, although there are only 5 vowel letters, and sometimes Y, but although there are only 5 vowel letters, there are really 18 vowel sounds. And when we go through and make those vowel sounds, we can see a shift or a change in our jaw. So what I want you to do is go ahead and look at if we were to make a long E sound. So put your hand right here and make the long E sound for me. E. See, I'm almost smiling. My jaw is up really, really tight. If I were to continue down this vowel chart and make all the vowel sounds, I get to that short O. Ah. Look at the difference there. E, ah. My jaw really dropped. If I were to continue to go all the way up the vowel chart and I continue to that short U sound, or the long U sound, excuse me, U, my jaw goes back up and I start to make a little bit of a more of a circle shape of my mouth. I'm going from jaw up high, down low, and back up a little bit. Students can understand this concept and really think about how it comes together in that shape of a V if we teach them to always put their hand under their jaw and think about where their jaw is when they're making that vowel sound. This is a great way to set up your vowel sound chart in your classroom by that V because of the position of our mouth. Let's talk about space in your classroom because I know that's a challenge for all of us. I have seen lots of creative ways to make space in the classroom. I've seen friends that put butcher paper real low underneath their whiteboard or their chalkboard. That way students can interact with the sound wall. I've seen teachers use that 3 presentation science board, and they are able to put it up on shelves when they can use the sound wall. If you already have a word wall up in your classroom, you have a dedicated space for words. Maybe we just want to think about rearranging or rethinking the manner in which we organize those words on that dedicated space already. But I do invite you to be a little creative. You might have to think outside of the box on how to make a tool that's accessible to the students as well as to you when you're teaching. And that leads me right into think about the ways in which you can incorporate this as a tool for teaching. And of course, that will lead into the kiddos using it as a tool for learning. If you really train yourself to go to the sound wall, let's see what it looks like on the sound wall. Let's put this sound on the sound wall. How do we spell that sound? Let's go to the sound wall. And you kind of train yourself to do that, your students will start to use the sound wall independently also. And it becomes a valuable tool, not wallpaper in your classroom. Let's talk about what we've learned so far today in this quick pick. We've discussed how learners perceive words, which is an important understanding for what we want to put in place in classrooms. We've talked about a traditional word wall, and that led us right into the limitations of a traditional word wall. I introduced you to a sound wall which really incorporates or really emphasizes that speech-to-print mentality that we work on with our language. And I shared some ideas or suggestions for incorporating a sound wall into your classroom. I would invite you to visit the Patent website. It has valuable resources, not just in literacy, but in all aspects of the educational field. It's a great resource for not only empirical research, but videos and training materials. And I do encourage you to spend some time on that website, www.patent.net. It'll be worth your time. Thank you for spending your time with me today and rethinking how we organize words in our classroom. My contact information is here. If you have any questions or want to think about some further ideas as to how to make sound walls work, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.